The Netcher-The group of Detroit was started by three young men at the time. Well, actually, we were kind of old even then. We're just much older now. But we began studying under Dr. Medew Jones, and that was in 1988. And from 1988 to 1999, we were students of Medew and Dr. Theophilo Bingham. We got our start initially under Roosevelt Roberts from the Comedic Institute. Next slide. Now, one thing that I'm going to try to do today is question your assumptions about things. So I'm going to ask somebody in the audience. I know we have one brave person that can answer this. What makes the world go round? Huh?
What makes the world go round?
Right. Well, this is a metaphor. I don't mean, it's literally gravity and magnetism and all that stuff. As a metaphor, you often hear what makes the world go round? Money.
Money or love.
People. Love, money, people. Well, I got some money here. This is money. Would somebody like to exchange this for me?
From your hand to mine, Leland?
No, I don't mean that type of exchange. I'm talking about this is some money. This is money. Have you ever seen money like this? Huh? Canadian. Well, if money makes the world go round, if I take this to the store, I should be able to spend it, right? It's money. This money here is almost worthless. This, if you use this as what? It would be just about worth that much. So see, it's not money. It's what? It's the idea of money. It's the notion of having something to exchange. It's not money, it's the idea of money. So what you're going to find that it's not money that makes the world go round, it's ideas. Ideas, words, concepts. So that one thing that I would like to do is to change, or I should say, I would like to question the way that you conceptualize the world. Now, if you look at this, it appears to be, for most folks, they would say it's upside down. Well, okay, next slide. Let's keep going. Just hold that in mind. Now, power. We also think that money is power. Power is the ability to define reality and then have others use those definitions as if they were their own. So that has nothing to do with what is money. But it hinders on how you define what money is. Everything I should say that, once again, ideas make the world go round, not money. It's the ideas that you put into your head. Next slide. These definitions are the ideas and concepts we accept as truths about the world and reality. This is how the Europeans really control us. They put out ideas, agendas, paradigms, and then we come along and we follow them. Why? One of the major reasons is because we don't have access to our own mind. In terms of, we don't speak an African language. We speak a European language that was imposed on us. So their ideas have the same effect as their words were, or as their words do. They were, it was their religion, education, all these ideas were imposed on us. They were ideas that was imposed on us. Now, of course, they was imposed by what? By way of the whip and the gun. Next slide. It does not matter if these accepted truths about reality are physical facts or not. So they've given us a whole ton of information to cloud our minds in order to make us feel and think that we're not Africans. Why? Because they know that it doesn't matter if it's real or not. If they make you believe in it, they got you. Now, at the date that there haven't been no evidence that anyone has come up with that someone named Jesus Christ has ever walked the earth. It's a fictional individual. But in terms of getting your butt in trouble and having a real physical effect, Jesus is one of the most powerful ideas in the world. And it's a myth. But it's one of the most powerful ideas in the world in terms of getting people to do something. So you have to understand that the ideas that you put into you are like nourishment. Next slide.
That's why you got to throw it out of the church.
was up there, it was interesting because I had friends in the audience. So just like I look out here and there are friends here, I don't think, based on my experience, that they will help you. They were in the back laughing while I'm getting thrown out of the church. So see, your friends, you can't always depend upon friends. But we have to realize that an attribute of the mind is to provide rationale for anything that you choose to believe or do. Now, the reason why this is an important concept is because, okay, at times you have to suspend yourself from your observation, from your thoughts, and understand that this could just be me rationalizing something that I don't need to do. But once again, you have to first understand that the rationalization that you give yourself is just that. And you have to learn to question it at times, because your rationalization will screw you up. Next slide. Dr. Rickety Amin Jones. One of the things that one of the things that Dr. Joe impressed on us was that we need to learn an original African language, and that there was a classical African language that every African scholar needs to know. One of the problems with the African studies that I have observed is that they don't have a foundation in African languages. And because of that, there will always be a disconnect between understanding these concepts intimately and understanding them as an outsider. A person's language, or I should say a cultural language, is the DNA of the people. If you want to understand people from the DNA aspect, study their language. Rickety Amin Jones was one of our first Netcher instructors, and in terms of online instruction, she has been one of the major motivators in spreading this language to African Americans. Next slide. The next person is Dr. Theophil Obedi. Now, unfortunately, the slide presentation I had books for all these individuals. But if you look the names up on the internet, you will find that all the books that I didn't bring, you can get them there. You can find the sources for them there. Dr. Theophil Obedi is one of the most brilliant linguists and philosophers in the world. He speaks every ancient classical language, so-called classical language that there is. As you know, the Netcher, the cuneiform, Akkadian, all these ancient abstract languages. He speaks them, writes them, and translates them. Next slide. Netcher is the oldest language of historical record. So, one of my reasons for learning this language was, as a youngster, I was always interested in religion. I wanted to know where did God come from? Where did this idea of God come from? So I figured out that, well, okay, if you find mankind's first language, then you would find the first concepts that he came up with to express all of these odd concepts like God, philosophy, religions, and all things like this. So I found out that language was what? It was normally called Egyptian hieroglyphics, but it's really called Medew Netcher. Medew Netcher means the words of the divine. Now, in that, because, next slide. Because Europeans, because we have been trained by Europeans, we tend to think of divine as being something other than ordinary. In Kemet, everything was other than ordinary. Everything was divine. So that they didn't have a special, they didn't have a special word to define something that was not divine. Everything was. And that's an odd concept for the Western trained mind to permit. Because how would you think that a piece of feces is God? Does anybody have a problem with that?
It all comes from the creator of creation.
Huh?
It all comes from the creator of creation.
Well, yeah, that's one way of looking at it. But the problem is this, see, something that comes from a creator is not it. In Africa, African cosmology, in some of them, there really is not a being that makes stuff, right? It's a transformation process so that all that is transformed into everything. Well, see, that's different because that means it's you. You are the principle of transformation yourself. But if you are made by what? A creator. Look, I'm not my daddy. There's a big difference, even though he made me. And, you know. So see, that is a different way in which Africans look at the world. Now, in terms of, this is a language chart. In school today, this chart is incorrect. Because even though they know, according to this, Egyptian hieroglyphics is at least 300 years older than the cuneiform. Cuneiform is still taught as the first language. Now, you have a problem, and this is how I dealt with it. I'm sitting up in the class, and the professor is running this. He's saying that cuneiform is the, world's first language. Now, I'm faced with the option. Do I sit up and argue with this guy, or do I get a grade? Because I'm in the school, and there's no black people in the class. I think there's one other black person in the class, and that day is when this subject came up. They was missing. I let it slide because I'm not there to argue with the professors. I'm not going to change their minds. I'm not going to change the institutions. You're there to get a grade. So I shut up. I didn't say anything. But what I did do, I wrote a paper. And I got an A on the paper. That's when I proved my point. But see, they don't let information out like that amongst the class. I got an A on the paper. Another situation in class. Can anybody tell me where is the Middle East? This is one of the terms that they made up not to talk about Africa, right? Brought that up in class. The response. You can write a paper on that too. We don't talk about that in class. Another thing I brought up. This young lady said that her cousin married a Jew. Now she was saying he was white. And I brought up, I said, hold up. Your religion is not a biological heritage. Your religion, it can be your heritage, but it can't be passed on biologically. Same response. Now this is an archaeology class. The response was, you can write a paper on that. So this is the common thing that you're going to get in school. This is why we have to teach ourselves. We cannot depend on Europeans to teach us anything. The problem is we expect them to. But see, that's a psychological problem on our part because they ain't. They can't. Because if they did, their whole empire would be in jeopardy. So, once again, you should write this down because this is an accurate listing of the chronological dates of ancient languages. Next slide. And we see the Hebrew that's come real late, 1000 BC. Now, that's 2,000 years after the Netcher. But yet, still, most of us think the Hebrew, because of our influence by the Bible, we think that Hebrew is actually an ancient language. We think Greek is an ancient language. Greek is not an ancient language. Next slide. So we see Greek doesn't even come along to 740 BC. But this is all the information or the type of information that you need when you go to school already. Because in school, this is information that you don't get. This is why we need to have some type of educational program for us before we even get to school. We should have a book list so that when a child goes to school, he should have already read David Walker. That's right. For a young child to go to school and not have read or be familiar with David Walker is a crime that we commit on ourselves. Next slide. Now, how do they know that hieroglyphics is the oldest language in the world? Because a German archaeologist by the name of Gunther Dreyer, this is in 1988, they found this information. So write this guy's name down, and when your professors try to argue with you, you don't have to quote Joe.
Yeah, Joe
because see, they would just ignore Joe. They Exactly. Joe Benavides made this point long before this. Dr. Ben even made this point long before then. They told us that hieroglyphics, that's what they used to call it, that was the oldest written language. Next slide. Now this is the graveyard where they found these images at. Well, I haven't shown you images there, but this information where they found the images that had the first writing on it. And this is in Abydos. Now Abydos, I know you've been there. It's Nubia. She's been there. This is in the southern part of the country. Now, the southern part, the people down there look like us. When you're up north, and especially if you're in the Cairo is a bunch of Arabs. But as you get further south, the people are getting darker, and they get more African in culture and style. Next slide. These are the stamps that were found in these graves. Now, the interesting thing is the language. This is some of the earliest examples of the language that they have. But if you can read it, you can read this, because this symbol is a symbol for a mountain. This is the symbol for light. It's called Ak. This would be Mu'ak. That would be the mountain of light. Then we have another same word for mountain. Then we have Gur. That means night. So we have the mountain of day and the mountain of night. So it's interesting because, of course, they tell you that the Egyptians, they got everything that they got their writing from the cuneiform. But cuneiform is written in wedges and little stick-like things. These are actual pictures. Now, the problem is this. These are really micro-sized. They're really small. And so the carvings on them that's why it looks like it does. If it was a much larger example, it would even look more distinct as a language. Next slide. That's it. Next slide. Next slide. Now, the Europeans got a hold of this language by Champollion in 1799. They found the Rosetta Stone, so-called Rosetta Stone. And this is how they did it. It had 3 examples of the writing on it. Now, at this time, they had already translated Greek, so they could translate Greek. And what they did was they saw the name down here, down in this section. In Greek, they saw the name of who? Cleopatra. And they took that and figured out the letters. And they went back and they said, okay, language is consistent. That's one thing about language. In order for it to work, it has to be consistent. There's some attributes of language, right? Those are called your grammar. Now, because we learned English in school, we did not pay attention to grammar. When I was learning the Netcher language, I paid for that. It made it painfully hard trying to learn this language because language is constructed around the science of grammar. Very easy. You talk about something. Every time you have a conversation, you have to talk about something. That something is your subject. That subject will be doing something. That's the basic formation of all sentences that we learn in school. The basic formation for a sentence is what? A subject and a predicate. So that means that you talk about something and that something has to be doing something or something has to be done to it. That's the rules of communication. That's your rules of grammar. Now, of course, it gets a lot more sophisticated and involved in that, but that's basically it. What I'm trying to show you is that grammar is not nothing that we should be afraid of. But as a youth, what you figure out is this. You don't need grammar to learn how to speak. So when we have it in school, it's never impressed on us that, well, one day you might want to learn another language. And the language is going to be based on the science of grammar. So if you pay attention to it now, when you really need it, you already have it. I didn't. So I had to buy a grammar book and spend a whole lot of time learning boring stuff as grammar. Next slide. But one thing that we have done is that we spend so much time doing this till we had to figure out, and I should also say that we had so many academic shortcomings, until we had to figure out a lot of shortcuts that you don't have to go through. So that the classes that I teach, you don't have to go through a lot of headaches that we did because we have invented shortcuts to help you through it. Europeans have been studying this language since 1799, like this. Next slide. They go over there and they meticulously trace over the images, take these back to the laboratory, and they translate it. Then they come up with their translations, they put them in books, and we read them. Not realizing that you are at the hands of the translator. Translators can screw it up totally, and you never know it. This is why Obenga, Joe, Richetti, all of them said that you must learn how to read the text for yourself. When I first heard this, I was at a Melton conference in San Francisco in 1980. Was that the first Melton conference? 1980, San Francisco. And Richetti was there. She said that like all the authors that you guys read, Church Word, Massey, all of them, she said they're no good. You have to learn how to read the Medew text. I was so incensed. I got up and I asked her a question. I said, how do you come on now, that's not fair. Everybody's not going to be able to translate this language. Could you give me some authors I can read so that I will know which ones are more right than others? She looked at me and she said, you have to learn how to read the text yourself. None of them are right. Now, at the time, I didn't know that. But once you learn how to read the Medew, you will see that 99% of information out here about Europeans is nonsense. They literally making things up. But if you can't translate it, you don't know this. Next slide. So, you must learn to read the writings on the wall. All information about Kemet is right there, not in the books. When you can read when you can read the reading on the wall, you become a translator. That makes your word the authority. I don't care what degrees you have. If you can read the Medew, that makes you an authority. Now, I don't have a degree. When I first started engaging folks with this language, it was online. And they didn't know I didn't have a degree. And that's when I really found out the power that Obenga and Joe, that they gave us. Because I could converse coherently with any PhD, and they not know it. At times, I corrected them. And that really, it gave me a big head. Because like I say, I have no degree. But this language, one thing that they have impressed upon us is that this language is powerful. It gives you a certain amount of power. This is why you have to learn how to read the writings on the wall. When we want to understand the attributes of the Netcher, next slide. Those attributes come from the wall themselves. Now, this is the attributes of the head of Aset. Now, Aset is who the Greeks call Isis. And of course, that word is throwing up a lot of hassle today. I had a friend who was upset because they were talking about this, what they call a radical Islamic group, ISIS. And I didn't get upset. I said, well, why should I be upset? Oh, well, they use ISIS. I said, it's their word. They should use it. Because, see, her name is Aset, not ISIS. So why should I be upset? They're talking about their own convention, not mine. But her attributes. Now, we hear that she is a God, right? Well, it doesn't say that up there. There's no word up there for God. This says, Jed Medew in, which is word spoken by. Aset. Snake, and that's a walking stick. That's a verbal construction, and it means word spoken. Then next is a preposition. That's the I in. The reed leaf and the water sign is the word by. So that'd be words spoken by. This is her name, these next three symbols. You see that she has an egg, because why? Women are the mother symbol, the mother concept. So our ancestors, they thought in terms of objects, right? So in order to let you know how special she was, they gave her an egg, because what? Everything comes from the egg. It's the beginning of birth. It's what we all comes from. Then after that is this symbol. This is a symbol for a female Netcher, a feminine Netcher, which is not, I shouldn't say female, I should say feminine principle. Then it has word. Word is the word for great. So this would be words spoken by Aset, the great Netcher. Now this attribute is consistent. Anytime we say her name, you should also include her title, the great Netcher. Yes, you can skip this. I'm not going to go into a whole thing on the Medew language. Now, I should also ask the film, is it done? Are we still?
Is the film done? I had a part of my presentation left. That's it.
Okay. Okay, let's go ahead. Hold on for a second. Let's go through this real quick. Now, this is the name for the Nile Valley, for Egypt, right? This is the real name. This is what they call themselves. It's Kemet. Now, in terms of the Medew language, it's a picture form of language, right? So that words that have similar spelling, how do they tell the difference? They put a picture on the end of the word called a determinative. That determinative will let you know what the picture means, so that the word Kim and Kimmy can be written almost the same way. So the first word, Kim, with that's an image of hair, it means black hair. The next word, Kim or Kemet, that means what? The black settlement, the black location, right? That's the name of Kim. That's the name of, that's the indigenous name of Egypt. Then we have what? Jamal, he gave us this one. The Medew. This is what the people call themselves. But you see, this is the plural stroke. You have is black determinatives to let you know that they're talking about the people. Here, they're talking about land. Here, they're talking about people. These are plural strokes. So you know that they know that they're talking about a group of people. So this is what the people call themselves. Okay, that's basically conclude my slide presentation. And get you to